Good morning, my name is Josh from Cyclones Oz, and today we're going to be taking a little recap on what became Tropical Cyclone Lincoln. It did defy the odds and actually become a fully fledged tropical cyclone just before landfall, and I'll break down why in this update. And then we're going to zoom out and take a look at the Australian picture. We've got some storms for northern New South Wales and southern Queensland, also into central Queensland and southeastern Queensland as well. And then we're going to take a look at the long-term forecast for ex-tropical cyclone Lincoln. She's expected to become quite powerful over the warm waters of the West Australian region, and that could be our first tropical cyclone over there. Then we'll take a more general look at the Australian weather picture and discuss the near record-breaking heat that we're expecting for Perth over the coming 3 days. So quite a lot to get through in this update. It's going to be a long one, so if you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing and also leave a like on the video while you're at it. So taking a look at the system right now, this is ex-tropical cyclone Lincoln. It's marching south of Burralula right now. It missed Robinson River. It made landfall basically right on the top of Centre Island, and now it's moving inland into the Northern Territory where weakening has taken place, and it is now a mid-range tropical low-strength system, probably with winds of around 40 kilometres an hour at the absolute peak around its centre. In fact, there's no observations around the storm right now that are suggesting stronger winds, so maybe around 30 to 40 kilometres an hour, gusting up towards 40 or 50 kilometres an hour, but it certainly did pack a little bit of a punch. It actually made landfall on the Northern Territory over Centre Island, and the Centre Island weather station picked up peak wind speeds of I think 63 kilometres an hour, which is just the threshold for tropical cyclones. So 1 kilometre an hour less, it wouldn't have been a tropical cyclone there, or they wouldn't have received tropical cyclone winds, but it definitely did pack a punch in terms of maximum wind gusts. Up to 100 kilometres an hour were recorded, so it was a stronger system than what I guess the Bureau of Meteorology thought. I was always holding out on this becoming a tropical cyclone. I did believe that it would get to tropical cyclone status in terms of maximum sustained winds. I just didn't think that he'd be able to wrap them all the way around its centre. So it did a really good job in the face of some pretty nasty conditions for the system. But I believe when you've got sea surface temperatures that are around 30 or 31 degrees Celsius, there's not much that can stop intensification over what is essentially jet fuel for tropical cyclones. As we all know, the higher the sea surface temperatures are, the stronger the tropical cyclone can get, because there's more energy in the water to be evaporated into the thunderclouds that rotate around the tropical cyclones. But that's enough yap on Cyclone Lincoln. He's made landfall. He's over for now. It's going to be West Australia's turn next for this system. Some significant rainfall will, however, fall across the Northern Territory in the path of this storm. If we were to go, I believe it's just going to mainly be this weekend and into very early next week. But you can see some pretty significant rainfall, especially on the southern side of the system. And if I was to jump back to the satellite imagery, you can see that the rainfall is definitely concentrated on the southern side of the storm. We've got this thicker sort of cloud activity moving through Corella Creek and towards Elliot right now. This is housing some pretty heavy rainfall here, very consistent and quite heavy rainfall, and this is sort of stuff that will deliver daily totals of around 200 millimetres. The forecast is playing out exactly how we expected it to, where we're seeing totals around 150 to 200 millimetres fall in isolated pockets up to 300 or 400 millimetres. I think Burketown has so far recorded about 400 millimetres from this tropical cyclone, and that was very much in line with the forecast. So the forecast that I had about 2 or 3 days ago is really going to be the one that's reciprocated in what's actually going to happen here, where we see widespread totals between 100 and 200 millimetres, especially south of the centre of the low. And then when it gets into Western Australia, we will likely see a little bit more rainfall fall out of this system, but we will get to that just now. You can see as it gets into around Sunday evening, we're going to see this system approach the West Australia Northern Territory border, where it will then cross over around Halls Creek, or maybe it's just south of Argyle at this point, moving through Halls Creek by early Monday morning, delivering quite a lot of rainfall, and this is where we're going to see this heavy rainfall contract out of the Northern Territory. Now, don't be fooled, this isn't a widespread band of rainfall that we're expecting to stream into this tropical cyclone, because at this point it will be a weak tropical low embedded in the monsoon trough. We're going to be seeing a higher than usual amount of thunderstorm activity along the trough line, which in this case will be extending between Wave Hill through Elliot, north of Tennant Creek, and then basically towards Burralula and Centre Island in the eastern part of the Northern Territory. And this is going to be pulse thunderstorm activity, not consistent heavy rainfall. So once again, there'll be places that pick up to around 100 millimetres from the pulse thunderstorms here, and then there'll be places that pick up nothing. As we get into Monday and Tuesday, we can see this system move into the Kimberley region of Western Australia, where it will likely intensify very slightly because of the phenomenon called the brown ocean effect, where it dumps enough rainfall to create what's essentially inland seas for it to promote and drive new thunderstorm activity around its centre. Now I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger and we're going to dive over to Queensland and take a little look, but I promise we'll get back to this in a couple of minutes because what the storm does after this is quite interesting. But it's Queensland's turn to get a little bit more attention, and New South Wales as well, because it looks like Monday night we're going to get some pretty good thunderstorm activity, especially across northern New South Wales. Once again, this isn't just one big solid thick band of rainfall through here. This is pulse thunderstorm activity that will be extending right up from the Victoria New South Wales border through Wagga Wagga up through Tamworth and then across to the Queensland New South Wales border, probably getting as far north as maybe Toowoomba or Roma, and we could be seeing some pretty strong thunderstorms also around the Gold Coast and Brisbane sort of area. But I mean, they've definitely had enough in terms of rainfall. They had like 300 millimetres yesterday, so it's just been this non-stop stream of rain coming into the Brisbane metro area so far this wet season. It's been quite extreme. I think they're already at something like 90 or 100% of their average wet season rainfall total through Brisbane and some of the Brisbane city councils, and there's still a couple of months. In fact, there's still the wettest months of the wet season to come with February and March. Well, I guess February's half over at this point. My has this year flown, but you can still see a lot of thunderstorm activity firing up through New South Wales Monday evening, probably at around 4 to 5 p.m. local time. Should ease off at around 11 p.m. local time and contract a little bit further inland. And we see a little bit more thunderstorm activity Tuesday morning moving through the coast. It looks like we might see a bit of a trough set itself up along the coastline associated with the low pressure system that will be much further inland, and a high pressure system in the the Tasman Sea, and this might drive a little bit of rainfall ashore around Coffs Harbour, Lismore and up towards Grafton as well through Tuesday, and then that'll turn into thunderstorm activity Tuesday night. But it looks like from Tuesday and Wednesday it kind of calms off across New South Wales. Still though, Queensland could be seeing some pretty significant thunderstorm activity Wednesday night, but it'll be very isolated and very difficult to forecast, so I'll be giving a detailed forecast basically on the day for that situation. It's kind of hard to predict thunderstorms beyond 24 hours in detail. I mean, you can tell where they're going to be, but you can't give a specific location or specific details regarding how much rainfall or what the exact impacts are going to be for certain locations. Now, you've noticed I've flicked it over to rainfall accumulation. We're just going to take a quick peek at what rainfall accumulation across New South Wales will be over the next 10 days. It's nothing extreme, but approaching 100 millimetres in some locations, and in already flooded and saturated catchments, this is the sort of rainfall that can push rivers towards or beyond the minor flooding alert. So if you do live in a flood-prone area, it's a very good idea to keep on top of the radar and also on top of the Bureau of Meteorology and your Shire office as well in terms of what warnings are out, what evacuation precautions are out and so forth, because in a situation like this it's just really better to be safer than sorry. But nothing extreme in terms of rainfall over the next 10 days, but there could still be quite a lot in one or two locations, up to 100 or maybe even 150 millimetres under the right thunderstorm. Now we're going back to the tropical cyclone over Western Australia now. It's likely to keep the name of Lincoln when it re-emerges north of Derby and moves through the West Australian waters by around next Wednesday or so. We're looking at the Eastern WF model here. The GFS actually has it taking a very similar track to what the Eastern WF forecast has. It's just nowhere near as strong, and I believe that's because of uncertainty. The GFS isn't sure how it's going to do over the Northern Territory in Western Australia, but if it can keep its low pressure system together and intact across the Northern Territory and Western Australia, then there's going to be very little stopping this tropical cyclone getting quite strong. The Axis G3 model as well is now starting to come on board with a closer track to the WA coastline, and I reckon that by around tomorrow or Monday morning it will likely swing it over the West Australian waters, and then mark my words, the Axis will do some really funky stuff with it if it can get it over waters. So that'll be entertaining to see, that's for sure. But you can see by Wednesday evening it's moving out to sea and it begins rapidly intensifying it straight away. Lincoln wastes no time over the waters here, getting up towards Category 3 strength severe tropical cyclone status by Thursday evening. That's just a day over water. That's some very quick intensification, and that's because it's going to be a small system in a very favourable environment, so it can use a lot of fuel to power what's a relatively small engine. You can think of it like that. That's actually a pretty good analogy, that you've got a lot of fuel here to power a small engine, which means it will be able to move quite rapidly in terms of intensification. It'll be moving quite fast as well in terms of forward motion by the looks of things. It's definitely going to be getting along here. manipulated by what looks to be a high pressure system over the mainland, or maybe a trough line actually over Western Australia, moving through the centre of the Gascoyne and maybe in the southern regions of the Pilbara. By around Friday, it's really going to be putting on some knots, but it looks like it holds intensity by Friday as it gets a little bit further south, and that's also quite a valid forecast there from the Eastern WF. The sea surface temperatures around Exmouth and Onslow, I'm not sure if you guys up there have noticed it, but they're just slightly below average this year, maybe a degree or so below average. And that's enough to knock them down to around 26 or 27 degrees Celsius, and that pushes them out of the really favourable zone for tropical cyclone intensification and into the more kind of just holding on zone for tropical cyclones here. Cyclones can move over 26 degrees Celsius waters and do just fine, but they're very rarely intensifying over waters that are that cold. The rapid intensification is reserved for 29 to 30 degrees Celsius waters. But then again, cyclones are interesting. All of them are different. And this storm, I wouldn't be surprised if it was to do something quite funny in the sense of intensifying when it's not meant to. Making landfall around Coral Bay by the looks of things. In fact, right on top of Coral Bay by next Saturday, just south of Exmouth, delivering cyclone winds between Karratha down to Carnarvon and then moving inland quite rapidly, and by the looks of things, weakening off there. But this is a very good forecast for Perth residents. Not only will this provide some reprieve to the heat that we're about to get through till Tuesday, but it's also looking like it might drop a bit of rain. I'm just looking at the wind forecast here. I haven't looked at rainfall yet for Perth, and I'm seeing that there might be a little bit of rainfall down in Perth, and this looks really promising indeed. The Eastern WF model completely misses it from Perth, sadly, or maybe one or two thunderstorms Saturday night, but the GFS model calling for quite a lot of thunderstorm activity, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was to happen, because what you generally get with a tropical low moving through here is you get an enhanced amount of thunderstorm activity along the west coast trough, and that will likely deliver quite a bit of rainfall to Perth. And I think the Access G3 model as well is also on board with that scenario, but I don't think so anymore. So that was very promising. That actually got my hopes up, that wind forecast, but it doesn't look like it's meant to be. But yeah, in other words, some very strong winds can be expected with the passage of this system. Peak wind gusts up where the system will be peaking will be approaching Category 5 strength there, and then upon landfall, you're looking at peak wind gusts of around 150 kilometers an hour. Now, am I saying that this is going to happen? Not for a second. Am I saying that this is something that we really need to be watching out for very closely now? Absolutely. Saturday and Sunday looks to be the landfall time, but any time from around Tuesday or Wednesday is when we really need to be watching what this system does. There will be twice daily updates and maybe even 3 updates per day on this system as it threatens Western Australia, because this actually looks like a really significant tropical cyclone threat. There will also be dedicated updates on this system tomorrow. We're going to really hammer this system home on this channel, and if you want to see coverage on it, then please do consider subscribing. It's a concerning forecast. The more model congruency that we see, the more certain that the forecast becomes. The Bureau of Meteorology calling for a 50% chance of this actually developing over Western Australia, which is very bullish from the Bureau of Meteorology. They very rarely give numbers that high about 7 days in advance. They did do it with Kirrily though, and it did completely bust out. So that's something that we might need to be looking at, is the fact that maybe they're overconfident in this system. Same with the Eastern WF model here, because the GFS is on board with a very similar track, but as you can see with the wind forecast, they're not calling for anything stupid strong. I believe they're just happy with a Category 1 or Category 2 strength peak, and by the looks of things, maybe even not even that, just a tropical low through here. So once again, something that we need to be watching very closely over the coming couple of days. The Access model now coming on board with it as well. This is going to be something that, as I've said for the past minute, something we really need to be watching. Speaking of Western Australia, let's go down and take a look at Perth, my home city. It's going to get scorching hot there. I'm not looking forward to this heat at all. There is a chance that the record actually does get threatened here. 44.5 is officially the hottest day in Perth. I've recorded warmer temperatures where I live, but that's probably because of the urban heat island effect. I live in a fairly built-up area, to be fair. But Perth itself, the heat record is certainly at a risk here, forecasting a maximum of 44 degrees Celsius for Sunday, which is tomorrow. So this is quite concerning, this amount of heat that we're likely to see extend into the Perth area. Up in Bullsbrook here, 45 degrees, and this is not heat to be messing around with, especially if you're elderly or feeling unwell. You need to be in a place that's air-conditioned and air-conditioned well. You can go to a library, you can go to a shopping centre, maybe not if you're unwell, but Just get to a friend's house, even if it is air conditioned. The nights as well are going to be very warm indeed. I believe overnight minimum are around 30 degrees, maybe 28 to 30 degrees Celsius as well. So the heat is not going to go below 30 degrees Celsius effectively between Sunday, maybe about 8 or 9 a.m. and then Tuesday evening. It looks like Wednesday will get a bit of reprieve from a westerly wind that's expected to come through, but it's going to be very hot. And if you are feeling unwell or you feel like the heat's really getting to you, then get yourself to a hospital or a medical centre, even if it's just to sit in the air conditioning and be monitored by a health staff there. Don't obviously swamp them. If you're fed up with the heat, don't go and sit in a hospital and take up a seat that could actually be used for someone that's feeling unwell. But if you genuinely feel like you need to get yourself to a hospital, there's no shame in heat like this, which will threaten records for Perth, because 45, 46 for Bullsbrook and Gingin. I think Gingin itself's going up to 47. That's actually very, very warm indeed. So concerning amounts of heat are about to extend into the Perth area. Monday will be slightly cooler, but still very, very warm indeed. It looks like the heat might extend through Gidgegan up and into Northam and the more inland communities in the wheat belt. So yeah, very, very warm. Not looking forward to it at all. And I think Rottnest Island itself going up to 38. So if you want to go to the beach or something, you're not going to be escaping the heat, and just use as much sunscreen as your body can possibly tolerate, because this sun is going to be brutal. I think we're going to be looking at UVs above 13 or 14, which I know is nothing on the tropical UVs, but still very, very nasty for Perth residents. It's going to be very, very warm indeed. So make sure you're staying safe, staying hydrated, and staying as cool as you possibly can between Sunday and Tuesday. But then beyond that, Wednesday onwards, I'm not seeing a hot day for at least another 10 days after Wednesday. So it looks like we might get a good break to really cool everyone's house down. Maybe even wear a hoodie or two. I mean, I was in a hoodie the other night. It was that cold. So yeah, hopefully we get a bit of reprieve to the heat, because it is so hot over here, that's for sure. And that's my tantrum about the Perth weather done the last 2 minutes of the video. Anyways, that's the latest on the Australian weather picture. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please you consider leaving a like, and also subscribe if you haven't already. Your support really does mean a lot recently. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye.